All right, so some of you know me already. My name is Rebecca. I have been with Mountain Creek Church since I was 15. I'm 27, so you can do the math because I won't. But so I started out 15 years old coming to the church. I was very upset coming up here. I'll be honest. I think I've told a couple of y'all before, and if not, I'm sorry. But I was upset. I was upset coming up here because the church that we went to previously, I had made a lot of friends. And I didn't feel it was fair that we had to move from that church that we were so planted in. Even though, I wasn't really well planted, it was just for the friends. You know, at that age, all you care about is your friends. But moving up here, I looked around, and I could not deny that there was a peace up here. I couldn't deny that. I knew that. But that just made me more angry. I still don't want to be here. But God was working on me. I'm trying not to do a whole long thing here. So I started off in the church, and I started off not wanting to really be a part of the church. However, God had a way of kind of still pulling me. I thought I could get away from going to service by going to kids' church and just cleaning. But some of you know what ended up happening. I served at the kids' ministry for a while. I ended up enjoying it, and pretty soon I was now one of the head ministers, I was lead in kid ministry, and I enjoyed it. And I really felt like God was really ministering to me through the kids and through just what he was doing with the kids here. And I would like to say that was my coming home message. God really worked on me, and that was it. I was full blown, on fire for Jesus and everything. However, God was still growing me. Even though I met him here in kids ministry, even though I felt God's presence and I knew of him, I still couldn't really grasp that Jesus loved me. I couldn't fully grasp that, to have a relationship with God, just having that full relationship when things go bad, you can always turn to him. Even though I taught that to the kids, it never really sunk in completely. And I felt man, is there something wrong? But really, my Christian story was a growing process for me. I was a seed, and I was still getting planted. I was still being grown. So fast forward to one of the worst years of my life. But it kind of started off first with a relationship that I had that was not supposed to be in my life. I had a relationship with a guy, and he went to church for me and all that, but he wasn't on fire for God like I was, or like I was starting to become. Because there was a part of me that was I want more. And I still couldn't figure out how to get more. And he was very well content with just being in a pew with me. And that was it. He didn't want nothing more. He thought, it's cool that you're working with the kids, but are you going to do this forever? Is this going to be a forever kind of thing? I was I don't know, maybe. We'll see. But I brought some visuals. I started this journal back in 2017. My sister, she's here with me today. She was more of the journal person. She always kept trying to get me into journaling and everything. I thought it was kind of lame, but I decided to give it a try. Yeah. I decided to give it a try, and I started the year 2017 with the word joy. Joy. That was my mantra for 2017. Little did I know that was going to be a very big mantra in my coming years. But I started this book, and during that 2017, 2018 is when God really began to shake my life. It started off with my boyfriend breaking up with me after deciding, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this church-going life anymore. I was doing it for you, but I changed my mind. I don't want it anymore. It's well, dang, that sucks. We were dating for 3 years. I thought I was going to marry this guy. So I was well, dang, that sucks. Of course, I was way more emotional about it. But after that, very, very shortly after that, my parents announced that this isn't working for us anymore. We are divorcing. And divorce is just awful, guys. I know some of you have experienced it, have gone through it. And I don't wish on anyone, not even my worst enemy. It was just awful. And to make matters worse, it was one of the most traumatic divorces. Because I've heard people tell their stories of, my parents got divorced. My parents it was a mess. It was a very big mess. And it was just this prolonged thing that honestly, it's still going on today. It's this prolonged drama, basically. So little did I know that the word that I started off for that year, joy, really was going to have to resonate with me for that whole process. Because it's like, well, what is joy when things are going just completely crap, basically? What is joy when, you want to give up? Like, do I really want to continue serving a God that's allowing all this to happen? So that was kind of like my journey to find joy, my journey to really know what is joy. And joy, what I found out during that whole process, and I'm still learning today, is having this joy that's not dependent on what's physically around you, but depending on the one who's with you through that whole process. And so, that was that. I'm figuring this out. I'm going on to my next journal because, man, I sure did write a lot of stuff in here, guys. Tearfully, all the drama that happened with it. Tearfully, all the questions I had. God, where are you in this whole process? And my hopes of what's going to happen. I was praying that my parents would get back together, that everything will be okay, that, somehow we'll make it through this. And so then it led to this next journal where it did get a little bit better. I was starting to develop this relationship with God, not depending on what was going on around me, but depending on the one who was with me through that whole thing. And I thought I got it right. And of course, we as humans, we still struggle. So this was kind of like that in-between stage of just, you think that you got it, and then some more stuff begins to happen. You start making some mistakes. You start thinking like, well, did I really learn anything? Like, I'm still going through this. And yeah, I don't want to say that I'm a stubborn person, but it takes me a minute to learn sometimes. And maybe it takes you a minute to learn too. But it was just going through that. And so then I got another shaking in my life where the people that I thought would be with me, depending, like someone that was always with me was like my sisters, my family. My family was a big part of like, just my identity and who I am. We're a family. We stand strong. Even though this is going on, we're still a family. And even that got shook. I went through a period of time, and me and my sister were okay with this, but where I didn't talk to my sisters. I fell in love again with my now husband. Yeah. And ironically enough, we met each other. We really got to know each other through serving at a kids camp. He was like one of the last picks to have one, like for a guy to come volunteer. We're kind of going down the line, like, who do we find? Because, I didn't have my boyfriend anymore. Then like we went through a line, and he was the one that said yes. I'm glad he said yes. But that led to some drama, a lot of drama in my life. And again, the questioning, God, did I do the right thing? Is this the right way to go? Did I make the right decision? I was like, I think I messed up, And it led to me having a very, very long time not talking to my sisters, which was so hard for me because we were so close. And, I didn't know that she was also going through a growing period of time, like where God was really ministering to her and he was ministering to me, and the new thing was forgiveness, the walk to forgiveness. And so I sound really choked up. I'm an emotional person, and I'm also pregnant, so now it's double the emotions. So it's like, keep it together. But the road to forgiveness for me was a hard one because, I was struggling with forgiving my parents. I blame them. I'm like, y'all messed up my life. We had a beautiful thing going. Even though it wasn't perfect, I still thought it was a good thing, But God was really ministering in my heart, the road to forgiveness in that. And so that's kind of like what this was about. But another thing it was about too was a real testing in my life. Like, I found God, but now comes the testing of, do you really believe now? Do you believe even though you don't have the people in your corner anymore? Do you believe even though it doesn't look like it's getting better? That was the real test right there. And through it all, like I was like, God, like, I don't have anywhere else to go. It's just you and me, and we're going to figure it out, but we'll figure it out, I believe. And I'm so, so glad that season was like, I mean, maybe it wasn't like an A+ season for me, but it was a pass because God really, really did reward me in the end. I ended up marrying my now husband, and I am now in this season where, like, I'm talking to my sisters again, and that relationship is just even stronger. Relationship with family, I'm believing, is even stronger. And one of, I guess he's an elder in our church, Gil, is he an elder? He's an elder. He was saying that the powerful thing about testimonies is not only does it tell us about what God has done or what he is doing, even though technically this is still has done, but it's also about what he's going to do, what he promises to do. And all of these things that are in common was he still promises to be faithful to us. He still promises to be with us, even when it seems like the world is against you. You know, as melodramatic as that sounds, sometimes it feels like that. And he still promises that, you know, there is redemption in the end. There is forgiveness. There is a path that leads to even better things. And I know this whole thing was about serving. In all of that, it was a waiting period. God still had me serving. Even though I didn't feel like serving, I tried disqualifying myself. Sometimes you feel like you got to disqualify yourself because you're just like, I messed up too many times. I'm too emotional. I'm too this. And God's like, okay, you can sit for a little bit if you want, but I'm going to still have you serve. The times I tried sitting myself down, God still had something else for me to serve in. And just being able to like look back and see that, how God is like, even in the waiting, I still want you to worship. And I do truly believe that serving is a part of worship in our lives. And there's so many good things that come out of it. So many good things. And yeah, didn't plan for a long talk or anything, just a little brief. But yeah, that's it.
That was so beautiful. This girl has been a blessing to me, and I've not been able to tell her much, but she has. And God uses her sometimes with just a word, and she's faithful in coming up and giving that word. And I just want you to know you're a blessing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am too. I'm sitting here a big crybaby right now, but I always am, so. And you know what, another thing about our testimonies that I was considering when she said that is it helps everybody to know that we're not alone in these things. It happens to everyone, and we need to know, because that is one of the tricks of the enemy, is to make you feel isolated, that it's only you. So thank you for giving your testimony. Michelle, are you ready? Michelle, too, always is here early for these things. She's in there cleaning and cooking and putting stuff together on her off time. I don't know if you have much off time because she's always finding neat little things to add to the tables, and a lot of people don't know this about her. And I appreciate you, that's for sure. So thank you. And by the way, there's other women that serve. If I didn't choose you this time, you'll be chosen another time, because I see it. I know. So.
I am not comfortable standing up here in front of a large group of people talking. So I'm going to ask everybody if they'll stand up and turn their chair around and look the other way so I can get through Okay. I was born into a large family. There was 8 siblings, and I was the oldest girl. So it was pretty much decided that I was going to be Mama's helper. And so I learned to do things and help my younger siblings through life. But through doing that, I learned a lot of housework and things to do and things to help. And when I've been surrounded by widows pretty much my entire life. And so my testimony today is kind of a proof text about James 1:27, where it says that a pure and undefiled religion is this, to orphans, to love the widows and orphans in their trouble. So when I was 11 years old, my mother had a friend who was a widow, and she was elderly. She suffered with arthritis in her fingers and her knees, so she needed a little bit of help cleaning her house. And my mother told me, she did not ask me, but she told me that I was going to give up my Saturday mornings to go and help this lady keep her house. And she said that I would get paid for that. Well, I didn't want to give up my Saturday mornings because I wanted to get my chores at my parents' house done so I could go out and play. And I was resistant to do that, but my mother insisted that I do it. So I went and I did it, but I had a bad attitude about it, and I was a little disrespectful to her when she started criticizing me. I kind of argued with her about she criticized the way I dusted and mopped the floors and stuff like that. So I smarted off to her and I said, well, if I'm doing this all wrong, then maybe you need to show me how to do it. Well, that kind of sealed that day. Everything was downhill from there. But when I finished, I went, she gave me lunch, she fed me lunch, and then she gave me my pay, which was a quarter. So I was very upset that all I got for giving up my Saturday morning was a quarter. So I went home with an attitude, and I told my mother that I was not going to do that anymore. She would just have to find somebody else. So my mom insisted that I was going to do that, if I didn't do anything else, I was at least going to go walk back up to her house and apologize to her for my attitude. So I had to eat crow and apologize for her. So when I went back home, my mom sat me down and explained to me why she wanted me to go and help and why that was life lessons, that you help those who need help. So anyway, I was not required to go and help her anymore. My younger sister got to do that. But then I had this lady, this woman that was my mom's friend. She had been a babysitter when my mom would go in the hospital and have babies. She would stay with the rest of the kids while my dad was up at the hospital with my mom. So when she was one that came and did that, but there was a group of ladies, and I think there was an organization that was called 1-800-RENT-A-GRANNY, because there were two other widows ladies that came and babysat us too, and they were also two ladies that I was required to help, but they were much nicer, and I got a little bit more pay and a little bit more benefits from doing that. And so then I will fast forward to when I was 13 years old. We bought a piece of property in the country, and my dad built a house. And the woman that he bought it from was a widow. And she also was crippled in her hands with arthritis and in her knees. And she needed a lot of help. She had chores that needed to be done. She had no children. And her sister had no children. So she was really a true widow. But I enjoyed helping her. I used to help her gather the eggs. And then my dad tilled her garden spot, and so we helped her plant her garden, and I helped her weed it and pick fruit and stuff. And I learned a lot from her because she taught me how to can foods and vegetables. And we gathered eggs, and she candled them, what you call candling them. And then on Fridays, she would take me into town, and she had a bunch of widows that she delivered eggs to. So I carried the eggs up to the porches or to the doors and delivered them to those ladies. And so she would take me to this little cafe, and we'd have lunch, and she'd buy me a huge piece of lemon meringue pie for dessert. And so I was happy with that. Well, then that was when I was 13 years old, so that was 5 years. Then when I was 22 years old, I got married. And in the Catholic Church, 5 years later, I divorced. And so I kept attending church, but I was prohibited from receiving communion because I had divorced. So I didn't see any reason why I needed to keep attending church if I was refused communion. So I attended the Mass for a while, but then I finally decided I was not gaining anything by not being allowed to receive communion, so I quit attending. So then I moved here to Texas, and when I was 33 years old, I met my husband, Jim. And we got married in 1990. Neither of us attended church, but we both felt like we needed to be in a church. So we searched for a church home to attend church and to grow in our faith. We've tried a lot of different churches, but we never did settle on one until 1995. But in 1993, I was laid off when I worked at LTV. I was laid off because the company was selling and they were splitting into two different companies. So we had a house mortgage to pay, and we had a car payments to pay for. So I thought I was going to have to go back to work. But Jim and I decided that if we could tighten our belt and cut down on some of the expenses that we had, that I could stay home and not have to go to work. So I did, but while I was at home, I had ladies that would need a ride to a doctor or a doctor's appointment, and some needed to go to the grocery store because they didn't drive, so I was doing that. So, and then in 1995, my father passed away, and my mother used to come down for the winter with us. And this, in 1995, after we buried my dad, and I stayed with my mom till she got all the paperwork and everything done, then she came back here with me. And while I was gone, we had a friend that I worked with at LTV, and she knew we were looking for a church to attend. So she invited us to attend this church. So we decided we'd give it a try. Well, we met the pastor and his wife, and we were immediately decided that was our church, that we needed to attend there. And that was in 95. So we stayed there until 2003. And then that is where we met Hope. We met her at that church. And so part of our helps ministry, that's how we met Hope. Then my career was secretarial, so I got to, with this other church, the pastor's wife, I helped her write the monthly missionary checks, and I did the bulletin for them, so I got to put my secretarial skills to work. So then, while I was at that church, the pastor and his wife were driving back and forth every weekend to Wichita Falls until they could find a house to move into. Well, when they came for the weekend, we put them up at our house, and we all, after church on Sunday, we all had a big dinner. Well, there was some students, international students from Christ for the Nations, that were going to be attending the next year, but they were in town for the orientation, but the campus was closed, so there was no meals or anything being cooked. So they came with this little church's youth pastor over Sunday afternoon for the dinner, and I had fixed a big brisket and a big dinner, so we all ate and everything. And so one of our students was already a pastor from Zaire, but he was just taking the condensed homiletics course, and then he was going to go back home. But the other one was from Uganda, and he was sent here to get his degree so he could go back home and open a Bible training school combination vocational school for orphans, so they would have a skill and a trade in the biblical teaching. So culture shock, I took him around to the grocery stores because they just have little markets, I guess, there. So took him there, showed him how to fix. I showed him how to fix a lot of things. He was puzzled about a grocery list, so I showed him about the grocery list. And then Jim taught him how to drive a car, so he got his driver's license. And so he's gone on, and he's pastoring a little church in Arlington, and he's thriving. But every year he calls on Mother's Day and Father's Day and on our birthdays, and tells us how much he appreciates it and So he calls us mom and dad, mom and dad. And it has been a blessing to get to do that. So, and then 2008, we joined First Baptist Dallas Church, where we were teaching special friends, students, and we did that until 2020. And while we were there, that's where we met Joyanne and Cordelia. And that has been a blessing that you cannot even imagine, getting to know them and to be friends with them. So then in 2020, the church closed. First Baptist closed because of COVID, so they weren't attending church anymore. So Jim and I decided we needed to get back in church. So then, fast forward, we came up here to Mountain Creek. We visited the church and loved everything about it. And when the first WOW meeting took place, I felt God was telling me to go extra early and get there extra early. So I did. And when I got here, I found Sue in the kitchen all by herself working. So I asked her if she needed some help. And she said, I'll take all the help I can get. So I started helping her and decided that was another place where I needed to be filling in and doing service. And because of that, when you're back there in the back and you're close quarters, you get to know who you're working with a lot more than you do when you're just kind of out in a huge crowd. And I can honestly say that I really feel like Sue's a sister. And I really appreciate her friendship. And so in closing, I just want to say that the opportunities for service are available. You can just look for them, and some of them just fall in your lap. And you can take advantage of the opportunities, or you can just say, wait, and I'll wait till another one comes along. But you really miss out on a blessing when you step up and do what you want to do. And they're kind of I think that there's a saying that says that you can't be everything to everybody, but you can be something for someone. And that's why I serve.
You did wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was wonderful. I know that's not easy, and I really appreciate you doing it. Thank you. And it just shows that it is more blessed to give than it is to receive, because when you give, you do end up receiving relationships, friends, and all kinds of wonderful blessings. And so thank you. Sue, are you ready? When I first asked both Michelle and Sue, they were very, very hesitant. So again, so appreciate it. They went and prayed about it. God spoke to them, and they came back and said yes. So I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm not a testimony giving person. I am now. You're right. Michelle, here's back at you. Love you. All right, so I was asked to speak about serving the Lord. And I thought about it for a while. And I thought, well, what is that to me? What does that really mean? And so there's 3 reasons why I serve. 1, it brings joy into my life. 2, it builds the body of Christ. And 3, God tells us to do it. We don't really have a choice. That's part of what we're supposed to do. And today we live in a world that is a me society. Everybody is worried about number one. Got to look out for that number one. Grab it while it's good. Go for the gusto. It's all about me. And I wasn't raised that way. In fact, when I was a kid, my dad was a YMCA man. He retired with the YMCA after 35 years. And so because of that, we always got the luxury of going to camp. Lots of fun. But one thing I always remember was every summer, after breakfast, when we were at camp for that week, they had what they called chapel time, and all the kids were required to go to chapel. And so we would go to chapel, and we sat on these benches that the man that had lived there and been the maintenance man had built. He took logs, split them in half, and then rolled them over, and then those were our benches to sit on. Very beautiful place to be. And there was lots of trees around and all that. But they told this story. Every year they told this story, and it was called I'm Third. I'm going to summarize that story for you because it could take a while. So I'll do the Reader's Digest version. Basically, a young man was going off to college. His parents were concerned that when he went to college and was on his own, that he might lose some of his values that they had tried to teach him all of his life. And so they got together with him and they sat down and they had a talk with him. And so the first day of school, when he showed up in his classroom, he showed up with a little plaque that said, I'm third. And everybody said, what's that all about? And he said, just give me time. He said, when I graduate from school, I will explain this to you. Now, it was a 4-year school, so it took a while for them to get their answer. But they stuck it out. And come graduation week, they said to him, okay, time's up. What's I'm third mean? And he said, well, basically, it's like this. These are the values that my parents taught me. God is first. Others are second. I'm third. And when they thought about it, okay, here's where I don't do good at speaking. When they thought about it, they thought, well, no wonder he was class president. No wonder he was captain of the football team. No wonder he was voted to be most successful. No wonder he had all these friends that supported him. And no wonder he was always the one running around supporting everybody else. But the point was that he did not put himself in first place. And we're not like that today. We don't think about others like that anymore. My mother had a saying. She always said, this world was not made for you. You were made for this world. And that takes away entitlement. You can't be entitled if you are living under that. Basically, she was building us up to be an asset to this world and not a burden. All right, so, together we make up the body of Christ. All of us here are the body of Christ. Each one of us has our own functions within that body. So, and we only do our one job. So I don't ask my eyes to hear. I don't ask my ears to see. I don't ask my mouth to speak. We all have our own job and they're all important. And if you think that your job isn't important, stub your toe and see what happens. My son came home the other day from work. He's a furniture mover. He had dropped a table on his toe. And it was already black and blue and swollen up. And he came home and he was sick to his stomach. And it was a mess, And it took him quite a while to get over that. Eventually he lost the toenail, the whole thing. But it was quite an ordeal. And that's just a toe. That's just your toe. And you think, well, that's really not a big deal. It's a toe. But it is a big deal. Romans 12, 6-8 says, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. Utilizing your gift requires an action. So it goes on to say, if you have the gift of prophecy, then you should prophesy. If you have the gift of hospitality, then you should serve. If you have the gift of teaching, then teach. Encouragement, give encouragement. If your gift is giving, give generously. If your gift is leading, do it diligently. And if your gift is to show mercy, we'll do that cheerfully. And there's more gifts, so you can stop and say, well, what is my gift? And serving isn't just hospitality. It's not just cooking and putting food on the table and making people feel welcome. We all have special gifts that we should be using. I told you that when I was a kid, I grew up in California, and my dad was a YMCA man. Well, we also had a home that was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Now, those mountains are between Santa Cruz, California, and Los Gatos. It's a mountain range. And if you remember the 1980 earthquake, it centered on Summit Road, which was about 10 miles from where I lived. Now, I wasn't living there then, thank goodness, because the house split in two. But that's where I was raised. And when I looked out the front windows of my house, which the whole front of the house was glass, we looked across a canyon, and the canyon started right there across the street from us. And all it was a whole bunch of redwood trees. And they were beautiful, and I miss them to this day. I still miss them. But it was interesting, when the wind would blow, these trees, which are anywhere from 200 to 250 feet tall, maybe more than that, and they would do this. They would just go back and forth, and you'd think, oh, they're going to snap. They can't stand up in this wind. It's too much. You know, they just keep swaying. And so I got to thinking about that the other day, and I thought, what made those trees stand up like that? You know, because if you take something straight and you poke it down, it's kind of hard to get it to be, you know, we put fence posts in concrete to make them stay, right? All right. So the roots on a redwood tree go deep, but they also go out. They spread out, and they do this. And the tree next to it's doing the same thing. And what's happening is all of those those roots are intermingling with each other, and they're building this weave of roots that are making that tree stand firm. You know, take a string, you can break a string. Take a tapestry, you can't break it. You know, it becomes very strong. So that's what keeps those trees so firm. So that leads to my next story. One time we had a big storm, and I mean it was big. The winds were 80 miles an hour, and that was very big for where we were at. And so my parents said, well, I think we need to go to the basement. We don't need to stay upstairs. The basement of my house was a half basement. It went back into the house, but the front of it was open, just as if you were on a regular floor. And so we could see out. And it got late, and I finally said, my bedroom was in the basement, so I said, well, I'm going to bed. And I went in the bedroom, and as I was getting ready for bed, I looked out the window. We heard this loud crack, and I looked out the window, and I saw this tree fall right on my neighbor's house. And I went, oh, and I hollered at my parents, and I said, a tree just fell, it fell on Dell's house. And of course, we were all in a frantic, you know, what are we going to do? You know, there's this big storm outside, and this tree had fallen, and the next thing we know, this lady's coming up the stairs, and she was as white as her nightie. She had been he had a garage, and above the garage was an apartment. And she lived in that apartment. And when she heard the tree crack, she rolled over in her bed as close to the wall as she could get. And when the tree fell, it fell right beside her bed. She could not step out of the bed. To get out, she had to climb up on the tree, which the tree we met, my brother was 6 feet tall. He stood beside the tree, and the tree was taller than him laying down. So that's how big this tree was. But she crawled out and came to our house. Well, Dell was still in his house. And my brother was good friends with Dell, so he calls. Okay, guys, this is before the age of cell phones. So it wasn't like you just pick up your cell phone and call them. We had lines that went from a pole to the house to the phone, and then you could make a call. All right. So Todd tried to call him. And he answered the phone. And Todd said, Dell, are you okay? And he said, hey, you know what just happened? He said, a big old tree just fell on my house. Just as calm as he could be. And Todd said, well, where are you? And he said, well, right now I'm under the bed. And what he had done when he heard that tree crack was he rolled out of the bed and under the bed, and the tree fell on his bed. and he would have died for sure. Now, when he got to the house, he was full of scrapes and scratches and everything else. And we said, so what happened? And he said, well, I got those trying to crawl out from under the bed with that tree on top of my bed. So it was a miracle that both of them survived that. It did totally demolish the house, and they tore it completely down and rebuilt the house. But then the question was, well, what made that tree fall? Because that was not common for that to happen. And what we learned was when they built the house next door to his, and they got ready to pour the concrete for the driveway and the foundations, they couldn't because the roots from that tree were in the way. So they cut them. And they cut them and they tore them out. Now, think about the body of Christ. When they cut them and tore them out, it made it weak in that spot. There was nothing there. And so when the winds came, the tree blew over. So we want to be careful about what we do with our gifts and how we live, because that's going to affect, what we do. 1 Peter 4:10 says, as each one has received a gift, minister to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Don't lose your gift. You can get a gift. If you put it on the shelf, it won't do anything. If I buy a gift card for you and you go put it in your drawer, it was kind of a waste of money because you're never going to get that free dinner if you don't take that card out and go to that restaurant and order that dinner. You cannot put your gift away. You have to use your gift. So when I give of myself to others, I find that my own selfish desires diminish, and then I get joy in my life. I'm not worried about me anymore. When we're babes in Christ, we're real me-centered. Lord, make sure I have enough dinner tonight. Lord, make sure my car runs. Lord, make sure that I get that job that I really need. Lord, make sure that I can pay all my bills. Lord, make sure, and it's all about me all the way through. But as we get older and more mature in Christ, we need to start looking at others. There's nothing wrong with asking God to take care of us. We should do that. But we also need to be aware that there's others around us that we should be looking out for them as well. So one final thought. What you guys don't know is that when you came today, God had a purpose for you. And his purpose for you today was to bless me. Because when I was able to bless you, I got the blessing in the end. So you all served as my blessing today. Matthew 25:40. I'll end with this. As you did it to the least of these, you have done it to me. What a blessing.